I don't sleep well anymore. Haven't since last spring. And whenever someone tells me I look tired, I just smile and say I've been working late. It's easier than explaining what actually happened. I moved into my apartment on Delwood Drive in March. Ground floor unit of a 2-story building outside Columbus, Ohio. The place was nothing special: beige walls, thin carpet, a kitchen window that looked out onto a parking lot. But the rent was cheap and it was close to my night shift at the distribution center. That was all I needed. The building had a basement level. Storage units mostly. Wire cages where tenants kept bikes and holiday boxes. My storage unit was number 7. I had never actually gone down there. The first strange thing happened about 3 weeks after I moved in. I came home from a double shift around 2 a.m., kicked off my shoes and collapsed onto the couch. I was almost asleep when I heard something below me. Not footsteps exactly. More like a slow, deliberate dragging, like someone sliding a piece of furniture across concrete. One long pull, then silence. Then another. I sat up and listened. The building was quiet otherwise. I told myself it was the building settling. Old pipes, whatever. I went to bed, but it kept happening. Every few nights, always after midnight. That same low drag across the floor beneath me. Sometimes it would go in one direction for a long stretch, then reverse, back and forth, like something pacing. I asked my neighbor across the hall, a retired teacher named Dorothea, if she'd ever heard anything strange from the basement. She looked at me for a moment before answering. She said the basement had been locked off for 8 months, after the last tenant who used to go down there reported finding their storage unit disturbed. Said things were moved, rearranged. Management had changed the lock and told everyone to use the main office to access their units. Nobody had a key anymore except the property manager. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. I started paying closer attention. The dragging always started between 1 and 3 a.m., and it always stopped the moment I got out of bed, like whatever was down there could hear me move. One night I pressed my ear to the floor. I told myself I was being ridiculous, but I did it anyway for a full minute, nothing. Then very faintly, I heard breathing, low, rhythmic, coming from directly below where I knelt. I don't know how to explain what happened next because there is no logical explanation for it. The carpet under my palm went cold. Not cool, cold. Like pressing your hand against a freezer door. And it spread. Slowly. In a circle outward from my palm, I yanked my hand back and stood up. Every hair on my arms was standing. I grabbed my keys and spent the night in my car. The next morning I asked the property manager to come check the basement with me. He was annoyed but agreed. We went down together. The storage units were all padlocked. Nothing out of place. No signs of entry. No damage. But in the center of the basement floor there was a ring. A perfect circle about 6 feet in diameter, scraped into the concrete, like something had been dragged around a single fixed point, over and over and over. The manager stared at it for a long time. Without saying anything, he told me it had always been there. But I could see from his face that he was lying. I transferred to a different unit upstairs 2 weeks later. I've never heard the dragging sound again. But sometimes when I'm lying in bed in the dark, I think about that cold circle spreading under my palm, and I wonder what was on the other side of it. My grandmother's house had 17 rooms. I know because I counted them as a kid every time we visited. It was a Victorian on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina. 3 stories, wraparound porch, the kind of house people slow down to look at from the road. She'd lived there alone since my grandfather passed in 2003. Last November, she had a hip replacement and needed someone to stay with her during recovery. My mom couldn't take the time off work, so I drove up. I planned to stay 2 weeks. I was 31 years old and perfectly comfortable sleeping in that house. I had done it dozens of times growing up. I knew every creak and rattle, at least I thought I did. The first night was fine. I set up in the guest room on the 2nd floor. My grandmother's room was at the end of the hall. I'd check on her before bed and again in the morning. Simple enough. The second night I woke up at 3:17 a.m., I checked my phone. The hallway outside my door was lit up. Not from any lamp or fixture. Just lit. A pale, directionless light bleeding under my door and through the gap around the frame. I assumed my grandmother had turned on her bedside lamp. Maybe she needed water. I got up and opened my door. The hall was empty, and the light was gone. I stood there for a moment, then walked to my grandmother's door and opened it quietly. She was asleep. Her lamp was off. The room was dark. I went back to bed and told myself I'd been half dreaming. The third night it happened again. Same time, 3:17 a.m., same pale light. This time I got to the door faster and yanked it open immediately. The light was still there, but it was concentrated at the far end of the hall, near the door to the third-floor staircase. Just a soft, sourceless glow hovering around the doorframe. No flicker, no warmth, still. I stood at my door and stared at it for what felt like a minute, maybe more. Then the light began to move, slowly, down the hall, toward me. I shut my door and stood with my back against it. My heart was slamming. The light crept under the door again. I could see it at my feet, and then it stopped. And then it was gone. I didn't sleep again that night. In the morning, I asked my grandmother about the third floor. She hadn't been up there in years because of her hip. Said she kept it locked. I asked her if she'd ever seen anything strange in the hall at night. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Your grandfather used to check on me every night before bed. He'd look in from the doorway. Never said anything. Just looked." She said it like it was still happening. I asked her when the last time was that she'd seen him in the doorway. She looked at me steadily and said, "Last Tuesday." Her husband had been dead for 21 years. I stayed the full 2 weeks. I told myself there were reasonable explanations. I repeated that every night at 3:17 while I lay perfectly still, staring at the light shifting under my door. I never opened the door again after the third night. But on my last morning, as I was loading my car, I looked up at the third-floor window. I don't know what made me look. There was a figure standing there, still, just watching. By the time I blinked, it was gone. My grandmother was sitting in the kitchen with her walker. It wasn't her. I need to say up front that I know how this sounds. I'm a 34-year-old logistics coordinator. I drive a sensible car, I pay my taxes, and I don't believe in things I can't see. Or at least I didn't. This happened last February at a restaurant called Paloma's on Route 9 in Bridgeport, Connecticut. I'd been working closing shifts there for about 4 months. It was a temporary gig. I'd been laid off and needed income while I looked for something in my field. The kitchen was old. The whole building was old. But it had good bones, and the owners, a couple named Teresa and Manny, had renovated it nicely. I liked working there. The pay was decent. My coworkers were fine. About 6 weeks in, I started hearing something during closing. It was always after the last server left when I was alone doing the final mop down. A sound from somewhere beneath the kitchen floor. It wasn't mechanical. Not pipes, not the HVAC cycling. It was low and intermittent. 2 sounds that alternated. A dull knock, then a slow scrape. Then silence. Then again. It sounded exactly like someone trying to move in a very small space. I mentioned it to Teresa. She told me the building had a subfloor crawl space that had been sealed off during the renovation. Access panel was in the storage room, but it had been bolted and caulked shut years ago. She seemed unconcerned, so I dropped it. But the sounds didn't stop. One night I decided to check the storage room myself. The access panel was exactly where Teresa said, a 2 by 3 foot hatch in the baseboard painted over and sealed. I crouched down and pressed my ear against it. The knocking stopped the moment my ear touched the panel. Then, after maybe 10 seconds of silence, something knocked back. 3 slow, deliberate strikes. From the other side, I fell backward onto the floor. I sat there in the storage room for a moment trying to breathe normally. Then I heard something else. Very faint. From behind the panel, a voice, not words. I couldn't make out words, but a tone, rising and falling, like someone reciting something calm, rhythmic. The same phrase repeated over and over in a low murmur. I left the building without finishing the mop. I didn't go back for 3 days. When I came back, Manny was in the kitchen doing inventory. I told him what I'd heard. He went very still when I described the 3 knocks. He didn't look at me for a moment. Then he said they'd found something when they gutted the building for renovation, behind one of the basement walls in a sealed room, maybe 6 feet by 6 feet. No door, no window, just a void in the brick that had been walled over, probably decades ago. The contractor opened it up to run wiring through. The room had been empty, but the walls were covered in writing, floor to ceiling. The same phrase in a language no one recognized, written over and over in what appeared to be charcoal. They had the room resealed before opening. Manny said the contractor refused to discuss what he'd seen after. That first day, I asked Manny if the knocking had started before or after they opened that room during the renovation. He said it started the same night. That was the last conversation I ever had with him. I handed in my notice the next day by text. I didn't explain why. I still drive past that building sometimes on my way to work. The lights inside are always on. Paloma's is still open, still busy, but sometimes I slow down, and I look at the building's foundation, at the base of the wall where that sealed room sits behind fresh brick and plaster, and I think about that voice behind the panel, still reciting, still repeating, whatever it was saying. I don't think it ever stopped.